Some stories aren't told. They awaken on their own. Welcome to Whispers. Some stories begin with a building, others with a grave. This one begins with both, facing each other across a narrow street in Savannah, Georgia. On one side, Colonial Grove Cemetery, a tangle of live oaks and Spanish moss that sways even when the wind forgets to blow. On the other, a 4-story brick apartment everyone in the neighborhood calls the one you don't rent. People will tell you the curse began inside the cemetery. I don't think it did. I think it began in a church, a few blocks away, when anger dressed itself up as righteousness and decided to make itself useful. In the late 1890s, St. Bartholomew's Church served the growing edges of Savannah's old district. Its pastor, Father Andrew Keller, was known for plain sermons and quiet charity. He ran food drives, visited mill workers, kept candles lit for the forgotten dead. His assistant, Father Nicholas Moore, kept the books, the schedules, and the gossip. By then, folks were whispering about the church at odd hours, shadows moving inside after midnight, candlelight where there should have been none, the shapes of parishioners arriving without footsteps. It didn't help that river fog liked to crawl in from the marsh and sit on those church steps like a living thing. If you're from the South, you know. Fog makes a liar out of the eyes, rumors sharpened, forbidden rites, words you're not supposed to say out loud. A girl child offered to something that wasn't God. Nicholas let the whispers travel. He didn't start them. Not exactly. But when a fearful town needs a mouth, it always finds one. One night, a local boy, sent to see what's true, slipped into the side hall during evening prayers. What he saw was ordinary. Bread, wine, old people with bad knees, a tired priest with kind eyes. But Nicholas found the boy later at the pump and pressed 3 gold coins into his hand. The boy told a different story the next morning. He said there would be a midnight ceremony. He said a girl would be offered. He said, I heard them practicing the words. Fear can lift a crowd the way wind lifts a brush fire. By 11:45 p.m., men were gathering. By midnight, doors were broken, candles scattered, screams tangled with hymns. In the crush, Father Andrew Keller and 3 parishioners were dragged out, beaten, and left in the churchyard. No court, no newspaper. Savannah, no newspaper. Savannah preferred its sins undocumented. At 3 a.m., under a boiling sky, the 4 bodies were taken, quietly, to Colonial Grove Cemetery. The groundsman said there were no open plots, so he made one. 1 pit, 4 bodies, stacked close. He wrote later in a letter that never reached the diocese. Before soil closed over him, Father Andrew did what the living often mistake for superstition. He promised something. If this town will not keep faith with the truth, then this ground will not keep faith with your peace. Sometimes a curse doesn't need a spell. Sometimes it only needs witnesses and grief that refuses to learn silence. Time wore new streets into Savannah. Families moved out to the ring roads. Students moved in. What didn't move was the cemetery, its stones leaning, its angels softening under mildew, its oak roots shouldering bones toward the light. Across from those gates, a developer bought an empty lot. He called his building Colonial View. The papers called it revitalization. Old men on porches just shook their heads. Day 1. The backhoe's hydraulic hose burst the moment its bucket bit the earth. Day 9. The forms for the foundation collapsed at 2:13 a.m. with no wind, no workers on site. Month 3. The foreman fell from the second floor. He swore something had taken his ankle in a cold hand and placed him on the ground. He only broke 2 ribs. He quit anyway. The night watchman lasted 5 shifts. He told the developer he'd see lines of candlelight threading through the cemetery, one after another, like a procession that couldn't find its church. Some nights the lights crossed the road and reached the chain link, then blinked out. Inside the building, construction finished, technically, but every unit stayed empty longer than it should. Leases fell through. Keys went missing. The building learned how to be patient. That's when Emily Carter and her 19-year-old daughter Anna found it. Emily worked rotating shifts at Reed Pharmacy over on Hall Street. She needed a place close enough to walk after 1 a.m. Colonial View offered them a discount. 3rd floor, Unit 3B, windows west toward the cemetery. First week, Emily loved the quiet. Savannah can carry noise like a bowl carries water. But in 3B, the world lived far away. No traffic, no neighbor TVs, just air and the faint click of the fridge cycling on. Second week, the apartment made a request. Keep the windows closed. Every time they cracked one, the drapes shuddered as if an elevator shaft had opened somewhere in the walls. They shut the windows. The drapes kept moving anyway. Third week, Emily started misplacing things. A glass she left by the sink migrated to the coffee table overnight. Her keys turned up on the bathroom tile, pointing toward the tub, like an arrow someone laid with care. She blamed night shift brain. She blamed Anna. Anna had always been intense. Dark art, stranger friends, a talent for finding edges and running a finger along them. At first, Emily thought the move would smooth those edges. It didn't. One night, a sound like breath moved through Anna's room. She reached for another blanket and saw a shape lean off the door frame and back into the hall. By morning, she wrote it off as sleep's trick. But 2 days later, Emily woke at 3:17 a.m. and found Anna standing in the kitchen doorway, barefoot, head bowed, eyes closed, as if listening to the floor. "Baby," Emily whispered. Anna didn't answer. When Emily touched her wrist, Anna inhaled like surfacing from a long dive. She didn't remember getting up. The drawings began the following week. Charcoal, ink, anything that would answer to a hand. Crosses, circles, words that almost meant something in English until you read them twice. Emily scrubbed for an hour, crying, then went to work. By the next morning, the symbols were back, darker, better aligned, as if a teacher had corrected them. Bruises bloomed on Anna's arms. Not smears, prints. 3 on the clavicle, set deep enough that the skin remembered. When she traced them, heat crept under her fingers from the inside, like a stovetop she couldn't turn off. That night, a man's voice, wrong, gravelly, too close to her ear, spoke into the room. "You don't get away from me, little one." After that, her voice changed. She still sounded like Anna, most of the time, but sometimes she didn't. On a Tuesday, after the late shift, Emily slid her key into 3B and heard her daughter call, "Mom," from the kitchen. "Why are you up?" She laughed, relieved and tired. She flipped the kitchen light. No one there. "Mom," the voice said again, this time from Anna's bedroom. When Emily opened that door, she found her daughter asleep. Genuinely asleep. Breath deep and even. As she leaned close, Anna's lips moved. Not a dream mumble. A chant. Wrong syllables walking backwards. Emily had to stop herself from shaking the girl. Instead, she put a hand on her shoulder and whispered, "You're safe." Anna's eyes snapped open. For a second, no more. The whites rolled up, and only the glassy lower arcs showed. Then she was just Anna again, blinking. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked. 2 days later, the apartment decided it was time. We don't play the rest of this part on whispers. We're not here to stage the worst moment of a person's life. Police reports say what they say. Forced trauma around the throat, a struggle, petechiae. Neighbors called about a smell. The manager unlocked the door. Emily was on the living room floor. Anna was in the kitchen, knees drawn up, eyes fixed on a point the EMT couldn't bring himself to look toward. When officers searched the bedroom, they found 3 books, a Bible, a Book of Common Prayer, and a worn paperback on demonology, with every passage about the devil underlined in red. Anna's first statement was 7 words long. "I didn't do it. He made me." She was transferred to a psychiatric facility out by the marshes. Doctors wrote notes with words like dissociation and trauma. Healing takes the shape it can, not the shape we prefer. Weeks passed. Anna's aunt, Emily's sister, was allowed supervised visits. She prayed. She brought a pastor. He told the aunt what pastors tell people when there are no good words left. That darkness can be invited without understanding what you've asked in. And that some places make invitations easier. The city sealed the apartment. No one bought. No one leased. Colonial View learned a new kind of quiet. If you drive down that block on a humid night, you can see both faces of the story at once. On the left, angels with their noses worn off by rain. On the right, 4 stacked balconies that never collected anybody's wind chimes. People say they've seen a figure cross behind the third-floor window at 3 a.m. Not every night, not often, but often enough that the story keeps its shoes by the door. They say you can't call the shape Anna. They say it stops halfway along the window and turns, like it's listening to the street, not the room. Old men have new versions. One swears he saw candlelight move in a straight line from the cemetery gates to the apartment's front steps, then climb. One landing, 2, 3, snuffing out at each balcony until the third. Another says he heard 4 floorboards creak in unison at 2:59 a.m., as if someone under the building remembers how many bodies make a pit. If you ask church people, they'll tell you Father Andrew Keller got his justice. The night truth came out about Nicholas Moore. How money changed hands. How a lie grew legs. How a good man was buried with those he'd served. If you ask me, justice isn't the word. Grief is. Grief that never learned sleep. Sometimes I stand across the road at the cemetery fence and look up at that third-floor window. Spanish moss hangs there like gray breath. The glass is clean. The room is empty. But emptiness does not mean vacancy. Not here. Not where a promise was made to the dirt itself. Some places remember what we make them hold. A wrongful death. A quiet prayer that turned into a vow. A mother who came home from work and trusted a door to do what doors do. Keep the outside out. If you ever find yourself on Colonial Grove Road after midnight, roll your windows down. Listen. If you hear whispers, don't answer. If you see light moving where no one lives, don't follow. And if you look up to the third floor and a shape stops to listen back, understand that it isn't listening for you. The world is darker than you've been told. And some stories, like this one, don't end. They wait. Across the street from where you think the dead belong. The story ends here, but they don't stop watching. Before you go, subscribe, like, and share, or the whispers may follow you home.